Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Perez. I'm a senior associate at Carrington, Coleman, and I'm here today with Punam Kaji, and she has been gracious enough to give us her time for an interview. The purpose of this interview, and we'll be doing a series of these, is to discuss the difficulties that in-house counsel and general counsel have had during times of COVID. And so Poonam's going to talk today about being her job at Benny Keith. She's assistant general counsel there. Benny Keith is a food and alcohol distributor. Her practice primarily focuses on labor and employment issues and litigation matters for the company. And they have about 5,000 employees working in 14 states. So she has a lot on her plate right now. She's also board certified in labor and employment law, and I will let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Hey, Andrea, thanks for having me. So I am in-house counsel at Benny Keith Company. I have been in-house counsel there since beginning of 2018, so almost 3 years. Time goes by really fast. I got most of my experience at Haynes & Boone. I started my legal career here in the DFW area, went to SMU, Dedman School of Law, and then worked in the Dallas Haynes & Boone office. I worked a little bit in the Fort Worth office as well. And then I moved to Houston, worked in the Houston Haynes & Boone office for about 3 years, and then came back to DFW, and shortly after went to Benny Keith Company. I've always done labor and employment law. I really love doing labor and employment law. I think a lot of L&E lawyers will tell you all of us are very driven by the people and the policies and being able to affect change in that way. So I'm very passionate about being a labor and employment lawyer, really enjoying being in-house, and excited to talk to you more about that.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again for being here. So so let's get started. So how has COVID changed your day-to-day? I can imagine, most of us are working from home, but I'm sure things have changed quite a bit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't believe that it was, March really when in Texas, this started to take a toll. And I think the hard part is, as lawyers, we are supposed to be kind of problem solvers. I think a lot of attorneys will say one of the things we love about our job is that we don't really know what problem is ahead of us that day, right? We're always learning something new. Well, this was like that times 1,000 for all of us, I think. We were all learning something very new, and there really wasn't answers out there. We had to kind of create solutions and problem solve. I think for in-house lawyers, for us, particularly at Benny Keith, we've got a legal team of 3 attorneys and then some support staff. And that means that we work a lot with our non-lawyers, right? We work with our business partners. And if you've developed a great relationship with them, then they will turn to you and they'll include you as you kind of come up with solutions. So it was a lot of pressure. It's been a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations on how are we doing this. And I think as attorneys, a lot of us take on some of that responsibility to help create solutions. So it's been pretty life-changing. I'm sure a lot of attorneys will look back and think about this time frame as a completely unique experience.
Yeah, I mean, totally. So day by day, right? We just learn day by day. What's the next biggest issue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously you said like all kinds of things have been thrown at you right now, but do you mind sharing some of the hardest issues you've had to handle as assistant general counsel during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, I found myself, 10:30 at night, looking at the CDC website, trying to grapple with, what does all of this information mean? How do I digest it? How do I create policies and procedures that are actually manageable and digestible? Right? I can't print out the CDC website and hand that out. So that was genuinely one of the biggest challenges for me, was learning this subject matter and digesting it quickly enough. And for Benny Keith Company, we are critical infrastructure. We are getting food to, end consumers, to the customers. And so for us, we had to keep running. And I think for some companies, they could close. And for us, we couldn't close at any point. So the goal, of course, was to be as streamlined as possible, to be as efficient as possible, and to get answers as quickly as we could on how we were supposed to do this for our particular industry. So it was just very challenging trying to stay on top of everything and trying to understand everything. And another piece of that, of course, is like many other companies, when you have multiple jurisdictions and you have every state kind of managing this in completely unique ways, that makes it really hard, right? So instead of studying at 10:30 at night once, you're studying at 10:30 at night many times to try to understand what is happening in each one of these places. It's just really difficult to keep up. And so I think that was the biggest challenge. I mean, it was. And then just the way that kind of problems continue to layer on top. So first it was, of course, you know, what are our safety protocols? What's going on with COVID-19 itself? Then as people started to consider like, hey, summer's coming up, what's going to happen with the kids, right? Like, or what are we going to do about that childcare question? So it was just question upon question that layered, and it became very complex very quickly.
I bet. Yeah. You know, trying to compare, you know, New York's response versus Texas response, like, yeah, I couldn't imagine. Oh. Has your process, I'm sure, I mean, since everything's changed internally, I'm sure your process has changed for engaging outside counsel too. Do you mind kind of letting us know how that process has changed also?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that I say, even before COVID-19, the most important thing for an outside counsel relationship is trust. And I think in a moment like this, when a company is grappling with a lot of stressful situations, and this is a moment where you need niche solutions in some ways, you know, you can't just say, here's our COVID-19 packaging, take it, run with it, you'll be good. I mean, that there was a lot of material like that, and that was great, but there is always nuance, right? For your industry, for the size of your company, for the type of employees you have, for language barriers, like all of those pieces, there's always specific nuance stuff that you need. And so I think that one of the things that becomes most important in those moments is, who do you really trust to help you through that and to know your company well? I think that a lot of in-house counsel probably leaned on firms and outside counsel that they've used for years, that they could say, you know, you already know certain aspects of my company, you've worked with us before, you know how we operate, you know some of our business folks, and we don't have to really recreate that relationship. And so I think a lot of folks probably relied on their go-to outside counsel and firms. But I would also say, for me, I was looking for people that were being cognizant of who we are as a company, you know, and understanding our size and our industry, and actually giving specific advice as it relates to that.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure there was lots of information from firms being sent out just about COVID in general, and webinars and all the articles and everything. And, you know, and if it's not applicable to what you're doing, it doesn't help, right? So, yeah. So have you also noticed some differences in the level of engagement and assistance by outside counsel after COVID? Like, was there a change too on looking at the other side of the picture, right, of what they were, how they were assisting you?
Yeah, you know, I think at the outset, there was a lot of material. You know, there was a lot of, hey, we're working on a chart that you can access that has jurisdiction specific information about restrictions. We're working on checklists that you can use for sanitation. I mean, it was just, you know, OSHA compliance. It was just one thing after the next that was being generated by outside counsel. And that stuff was really great. I think we've kind of seen some of that quiet down a little bit. We're seeing a little bit now about, you know, how to reopen and things like that. But again, for a company like ours that's been open the whole time, I don't think I ever really received a specific article like, our firm wrote this article on critical infrastructure or distributors, or, and that would have been incredibly helpful. Would have been really nice to say, okay, this is the perfect resource for those issues. I think that we're going to see the impact of COVID-19 for probably the whole course of next year, right? Maybe as the vaccine comes out, there'll be questions around that. We still don't really know what's to come. And so, there'll probably be some M&A issues that come out of this, not my area, but there's just going to be so much happening. And I think that firms should continue to be creative and come up with new material and answers. I will say one thing I noticed was there's so much around the few federal regulations that did come out, like the CARES Act, which didn't apply to us. It was for smaller employers. And I was just inundated with information around that. And it was one of those moments where I was like, this would be something that we could really just say, okay, here's what we need to do, but it doesn't apply to us. And it was surprising to me how many, even firms that know me and attorneys that know me sent that to me. It took me, I kept double checking myself, like, no, this doesn't apply to me. Why are you sending this to me?
There's not something I'm missing, right?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. There's still in my inbox is filled with, constant, webinars and things like that on updates and, every time there's a new guideline issued, it's like,
right.
With messages. So, has the scope, what are some things that outside counsel has sort of been the most helpful and what have been sort of the least helpful things for you?
I think the most helpful thing, quite frankly, has been the people who just checked on me.
Yeah.
It's been such a crazy time, and the unknowns, and for those of us that kind of put our heart into our job, I think there's just been a level of stress and anxiety around it because you really want to make sure you're doing the right thing. It feels like the stakes are really high and you're trying to make the right choices. And I think that the thing that I appreciated the most were the lawyers that sent me a note and said, hey, things are crazy right now. Are you okay? And I think it actually took a while before some of my outside counsel peers realized how stressful it was for in-house counsel, because those first couple of weeks, I think it was like everyone's home, everyone's working off their couch. And I think the experience maybe for outside counsel and in-house counsel in that moment initially was really different, because in-house counsel was huddling in meetings, a lot of them over Teams, a lot of them over Zoom, new platforms that we don't normally do meetings. You're trying to figure out how to even act in a meeting like that. There's just so much to it. Yeah, there was a lot of newness all at once and a lot of things to adapt to. And kind of getting everybody on the same page to like wrangling everybody to be like, here's where we are, here's what we need to do next. There was just a lot there. And I think a lot of outside counsel was like, hey, are you working from home? Do you love it? And it was kind of like, I'm not even ready to process the work from home or not work from home thing. I'm in a meeting every, 5 minutes getting pulled in different directions. And so I think that it took a while for outside counsel to really kind of gather like, wow, our in-house counsel friends are actually kind of tackling all kinds of questions too. There were times where there were questions and I'm like, hey, that's not exactly a legal question. I'm not going to be like, no, I won't answer it. I'll definitely kind of get on a call and we'll think it through together. But certainly I think that when you're in-house counsel, you kind of just wear a problem solver hat and you're expected to be a team player. And that's part of what makes it so fun, but that's part of what makes it different and a different kind of stress, right? Than being at the firm where you're arm's length from your issues.
Yeah. There's still some separation, but it's like you're right in the middle of it. So, yeah. Would you say that right now you are relying more or less on outside counsel during COVID?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, quite frankly, it's probably about the same. We did a lot of, we do a lot of our work in-house as it is. I use outside counsel for matters kind of once, employment matters once they kind of turn into litigation. Until then, I manage them, and I work a lot with our human resources and other departments to manage issues internally. So right now it's been kind of the same pace as usual, but I will say there was months of the summer and that I think other people felt this way too, where we were so much at our bandwidth, but at the same time, not really in a great position to say, I need to give all this work to outside counsel. It's kind of hard to divvy up, especially the COVID-19 related work, right? It's kind of hard to delegate that entirely. You're going to have to, as your kind of clients, even if you were to delegate that work, I think because you are the client, you kind of have to continue to be a part of that process. So there were times this summer where I think so many of us were at our bandwidth. We were working around the clock, but at the same time, it would have been very difficult to necessarily parse out how to delegate it. So it was kind of more of a time where it was like, if something else came up, non-COVID related, I may be more in a position to be like, this is something that I might have to delegate right now because my plate is full with everything else going on. So I can see that kind of going into the fall, that we're already all juggling a lot. And if we're able to use outside counsel to kind of take a few things off the plate, then that'll definitely be helpful in those moments. But I think it's genuinely hard to delegate some of these COVID-19 questions and answers because ultimately they're very specific to your company.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of business decisions too, right? So as
right.
well, meetings.
Right.
So yeah. So do you have any recommendations? I know you've sort of said some things that have helped you the most, but do you have any specific recommendations for outside counsel to be better and help you more? So
yeah, that's a good question. I think it's been such an interesting time because business development in many ways is kind of shut down. We're not able to go to the lunches. We're not able to go to the events that we would normally go to. I'm still doing a good amount of CLE because I'm seeing a lot of good webinars and things like you mentioned in my inbox. But those touch points are kind of missing. And I think what I said before, I've had a couple of people say, can we schedule a 15-minute catch up, or, and those end up being helpful. They end up kind of giving me a little bit of insight into what other clients are doing. Like, I think benchmarking is super helpful right now. It would be very helpful to kind of say, well, tell me what you're up to. Oh yeah, that's similar to what my other clients are saying. Or yeah, my other clients are also experiencing that issue, right? That is something that can be much easier for our outside counsel to do without any attorney-client privilege issues, just kind of giving a big picture of, yeah, I'm hearing that same issue. Because I know what happened to me is I was so busy and so focused on everything going on. Every now and then I'd come up for breath and reach out to in-house counsel friends and say, are you juggling this, this, and this? And they would say, yes, like, oh my gosh, like I am. And I thought I was alone. Like it could actually be a pretty lonely environment. When you're in-house, especially at a company with a smaller legal department, you've got a couple of attorneys to bounce ideas off of, but for the most part, you're not around lawyers all the time, and you're not talking to other in-house departments all the time. So I think that the benchmarking questions, hey, this is what I'm seeing my other clients look at. Is this something you've looked at? And then I think the more niche and specific advice and industry specific situations is something really worth looking at for firms. I know I still remember when I was at a firm, and from a business development perspective, there was a lot more thought process going into industry specific, even on like your website, it'd be like, here's a type of law and here's the industry, because every industry does really have its own nuance. And so I think that would have been a really good area to say we've broken up our COVID-19 resources by industry, and maybe that's out there and I didn't research it. So, I'm not trying to say firms didn't do that, but I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, let's see. I think we got time for one more question here. So, we've talked about specificity a lot too, and sort of looking at your business, but is there any other advice you have when outside counsel's pitching their services to you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've realized going in-house is that in-house counsel and outside counsel really do have very different roles. And we actually don't, I think before I went in-house, I really had no idea what in-house lawyers were doing. I thought I did, right? Especially people tend to think, oh, it's such a better lifestyle. Like there's just kind of these assumptions about in-house counsel. But you don't really know what the stresses are and what in-house counsel deals with until you kind of take that transition and actually have seen both sides, or do a secondment or something like that. So I think, quite frankly, I think a lot of outside counsel tend to do a lot of great work, but things that kind of miss the mark in terms of what in-house really needs, like giving us a 20-page, even if it's a free resource. I mean, it can literally be like, hey, here's something we made on COVID-19 and it's beautiful and it's glossy, but I probably need like a 10-minute call telling me what it's about, because we just don't have time and things move really quickly. And so I think that's one of the biggest things. Like I think a lot of the resources that are made and sent out are probably really great, but I'm missing kind of that high level of, hey, here's what this is. It's going to apply to you. If you want to talk for a minute, we can talk about how you can use it. Things like that, because I think at the end of the day, it's almost like, what I tell mentees or younger attorneys, put that main point up front and let them know this is designed to help you in this way. Otherwise, it's just another thing in our inbox and it's just another webinar, and it's really hard to figure out how it's going to be useful for me right now when I'm getting bombarded with a bunch of other stuff and I need to quickly figure out solutions. And then I think understanding that in-house counsel does work a lot with non-lawyers and, finding things that are digestible and practical. I can't really pass along something that's, I need something practical. I need something really digestible and something that's not going to completely disrupt business, right? I don't want my local managers to have to read even a 2-page document, to be quite frank. They have so much on their plate right now. They're trying to stay running. So even a 2-page document at that point is a little bit much. Like I need to be able to give them a snapshot, something very quick and digestible. So that's really what I think. And it's challenging. It's so hard to look at. I mean, I spent nights, like I said, looking at the CDC website to take all of that and say, here's the most important digestible things that you could do right now. But with how fast it was moving and how it continues to evolve, I think that's what we need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Punam, for being here today and taking time. I know you're incredibly busy. And so we hope that our viewers got some good information and insight from this interview. And and thank you again.
Thanks so much.